Thank you. It's absolutely great to be here. Scotland is a different country. It feels different, and it's always great to come up here from the lost cause that is England. I want to discuss three of Julian's favourite words: continuity, solidarity, and co-production. In his last book, published in 2010, there are 91 mentions of continuity, 27 of solidarity, and 44 of co-production or co-producers in just 328 pages. He knew that these three words are deeply interconnected and fundamentally important to humane and effective healthcare. All concern relationships between people, a particular patient and a particular healthcare professional. Without the serial encounters of continuity of care, it is much more difficult to build the sort of mutually trusting relationship that is the foundation of solidarity and which actively enables the co-production of health, which is itself an infinitely more useful coinage than the current flimsy political correctness of shared decision-making or person-centred care. All three of Julian's words put the relationship between patient and healthcare professional at the centre of everything the NHS is about. In his book, Julian calls for a shift in both professional and patient behaviour towards continuing care, more attention to causes as well as to consequences, greater interest and investment in the uncertain beginnings of disease, where clinical and social care meet the boundaries of public health. And for me, one of Julian's great strengths was that he always sought to operate across these particular boundaries. In the red bit in the middle, where all the circles of the primary care Venn diagram overlap, he sought to bridge the often artificial polarities between clinical and social care, and between concern for the individual and concern for the population and the community. And I think that the great strength of the Deep End project is not only that it seeks to reverse the inverse care law, but also that it has set out to operate in this same place. Too often, when people become interested in public health, they lose sight of the fundamental importance of what happens between a particular individual patient and a particular doctor. Julian never made that mistake. Effective healthcare has to be built around real, continuing personal stories, not episodic fragments of standardised process. Is there a better description of the impact of the QOF than episodic fragments of standardised process? The emphasis here is on the real. We are not talking about the skeletal vignettes that populate so many policy documents. We are talking about the detail of actual lives. And each one of these stories is different because each life and each context is different. And this is what makes general practice so difficult, so effective, and so fascinating. Stories are told throughout medicine, but only the serial encounters of general practice offer the possibility of doctors and patients sharing their stories over many years. Stories that vary from those reporting the comforting minutiae of daily life to those which grapple with the need to keep going in the face of overwhelming personal disaster. Serial encounters build a continuing relationship between two unique human individuals, neither of which is interchangeable, and the continuing relationship builds solidarity. Nigel Stott, another giant of general practice in Wales, saw the degradation of those episodic fragments of standardised process with a similar clarity when he wrote, "The theme about control and standards in the day-to-day work of the family doctor is concerned with the control of outputs and regulating processes. It uses no theoretical constructs, it adopts the language of accountancy, and it regards diversity as a product of uncontrolled professional license rather than an ecological reality." It is the thirst for control in an uncertain world that is so disturbed by the unruliness of story and the unpredictability of human relationships and yet these are the building blocks of health care, and they have to be not only accommodated, but treasured. Walter Benjamin, the German Jewish philosopher and essayist, wrote about the decline of storytelling in an essay published in 1936. Less and less frequently do we encounter people with the ability to tell a tale properly. It is as if something that seemed inalienable to us, the securest among our possessions, were taken from us, the ability to exchange experiences. Yet if we cannot exchange our experiences, we lose the foundation of all three of Julian's favourite words and all three circles of the primary care Venn diagram. Benjamin continues, one reason for this phenomenon is obvious. Experience has fallen in value, and it looks as if it is continuing to fall into bottomlessness. And I think that's the predicament of general practice today. General practitioners spend their professional lives listening to stories, although those stories are increasingly fragmented by the destruction of continuity. Those stories told them by their patients, and in so doing, we learn an enormous amount about the detail of lives, context, and relationships, and about fear, courage, suffering, and hope in the face of illness and disease. The importance of the knowledge and wisdom that we gain from these stories is neglected, as these stories are systematically and too easily dismissed as anecdote. Within the market framing of neoliberal healthcare, the clinical judgment of experience is marginalised, and with it the importance of the serial encounters of continuity. Standardised technical investigations and treatments are prioritised over understanding, meaning, and co-production. And perhaps this is the reason why continuity has been all but abandoned. Yet we need to rise to these fierce challenges from Wales, but by describing the ecological reality of the primary care consulting room in the 21st century. The product of personal medical care was not, and still is not, simply reduced mortality or shortened or improved outcome of illness. Medical interventions have always, to some extent, met real, personal, social, and political needs other than manipulations of the mechanisms of illness. Serial encounters create an ongoing relationship, and this continuity matters because the personal, social, and political context of illness is always important, and because dialogue is different from interrogation. It is important to note the difference between interrogation and dialogue. Questions which admit of only yes or no answers do not allow the respondent to provide a description of his or her experience. If the physician is to learn something about the patient's experience, he or she must initiate a dialogue with the patient, a dialogue that allows the patient to provide a first-person narrative of the illness. And such a dialogue is so much easier for both parties within a continuing relationship. There are phenomena like music and love, just to give two examples, the importance of which is beyond evidence. Some aspects of human life cannot be proved and do not need to be proved. Continuity is another such aspect. Whoever heard, thank goodness, of evidence-based love or evidence-based music? Why do we always allow ourselves to be backed into a position where we must produce scientific evidence to confirm the importance of continuity of care before it can be valued? Relationships are fundamental to human existence, and human beings seek to create enduring and trusting relationships in all spheres of life. Medicine cannot be an exception because relationships help to create meaning and they reduce fear. One of the key roles of the doctor is to provide patients with an explanation of what is happening to them, a plausible explanation that can be understood by the particular patient within the individual context of their own life story, which helps them to feel less afraid and more hopeful. This optimism seems actively to promote recovery. Physiological processes, meanings, and relationships are all interconnected, and the interactions between patients and those who care for them can either diminish or exacerbate symptoms and suffering. Meaning has biological consequences that can both harm and heal. Biography is an act of human solidarity, and in its own way, an act of recognition and of love. And biography alters biology through psychoneuroimmunological pathways, if I could say that word, it would be great, and epigenetic effects that are slowly being unravelled. This is the extraordinary French-American sculptor Louise Bourgeois, then aged 86, in a photo taken 12 years before she died in 2010 at the age of 98. In her diary, she wrote, "You are born alone. You die alone. The value of the space in between is trust and love. That is why, geometrically speaking, the circle is a one. Everything comes to you from the other. You have to be able to reach the other. If not, you are alone." And the truth of this is what gives the relationship between doctor and patient its importance and its power. And solidarity seems to be one of the points at which art and science meet. Solidarity, a belief that humans are all of one species, that we are social animals who stand or fall together, whose survival depends on helping one another, and whose genetic diversity is a strength rather than a weakness, has sound foundations in human biology. And where both art and science also confront politics. The concept of solidarity as a guiding principle for healthcare has its diametrical opposite in the view that healthcare can most effectively and efficiently be provided as a commodity traded for profit. Once doctors are paid according to production, not of better health outcomes, but of processes assumed to result in those outcomes, the stage is set for clinical inflation because the market rewards credulity and penalises scepticism. God, Julian did write like an angel. And the stage is set not for co-production, but for the sale of investigative and treatment technologies, some of which do bring substantial benefits to some patients, but many of which cause harm to patients that outweigh possible benefits. And the financial costs of clinical inflation, compounded by the opportunity cost to professional time, threaten the viability of existing healthcare systems based on social solidarity and funded through progressive taxation, as well as the global ambition to achieve universal health coverage. In this disturbing book published in 2011, Raymond Downing, a family physician in Nairobi, writes, never know whether that should. "We are now in a phase beyond medicalisation where even health, the opposite of medicine's focused disease, has become medicalised. Biomedicine, assuming it knows what health is, imposes that understanding on everyone. Medicine used to claim authority over the cracks and interruptions in life. Now it claims authority over all of life. And the only way of resisting this very real colonisation of health is through sharing Julian's commitment to the co-production of health within primary care. Perhaps the greatest strength of this proposal is that it allows health to be defined within the conversation, within the consultation, taking into account the history and context of each individual patient. And it resists normative statistical definitions imposed from outside. In pursuit of solidarity between doctors and patients, between healthcare professionals, and across and between societies, and in pursuit of the co-production of health, Julian urged greater continuity, continuity of care, continuity of experience, continuity of thought, and continuity of information across interprofessional boundaries. Continuity demands effort, both to use it and to protect it. And as soon as medicine moves beyond simple technical procedures, the benefits of practicing within ongoing, trusting relationships are obvious to practitioners and valued by patients. However, it is difficult for the relatively young and healthy to appreciate how important a trusting relationship becomes for those facing the profoundest fears, and young doctors with limited experience of how much easier it is to provide appropriate care to a known patient have similar difficulties. When most of the electorate and most policymakers and politicians are also relatively young and healthy, I've lost my place. No, I haven't. The promotion and the support of trusting relationships within healthcare is unlikely to be awarded the priority they warrant, and the current policy situation within the UK bears this out. Yet, although I have argued that we should not need evidence to support the importance of continuity care, last June, we saw the publication of this paper with this conclusion. The first systematic review reveals that increased continuity of care by doctors is associated with lower mortality rates. Although all evidence is observational, patients across cultural boundaries appear to benefit from continuity of care with both generalist and specialist doctors. Many of these articles call for continuity to be given a higher priority in healthcare. Despite substantial, successive technical advances in medicine, interpersonal factors remain important. So, protecting the serial encounters of continuity of care not only reduces mortality rates, but it's also an act of political resistance. What's not to love? Thank you, Julian.